You are amazing. You are beautiful. You are wonderful. You are God in action. You are creation itself, demonstrating itself, seeing itself. Who went around this week singing to humanity, to human beings? You're amazing. Who had that week this week? Some people did. Some people could see it. Who had a week where you looked around and you went, you are not amazing. This is not wonderful. This is not beautiful. And this does not look like the God I know. It's been an interesting week, hasn't it, spiritually? We all have what's going on in our own beings, and then we all have the global consciousness that we're aware of. So this week in the media and in our world and in our hearts, we saw a couple of demonstrations. We saw a demonstration on Wednesday that looked anything but amazing. And then we see a community pulling together, a global community, a national community, a spiritual community, a family, standing in God consciousness, standing in light, standing in healing, standing in forgiveness. And that is beautiful and amazing. It is an act of forgiveness of biblical proportions, the type of forgiveness that has been offered this week. So we hear this idea that we're amazing. We hear this concept that we're created in the image and likeness of God. You are created in the image and likeness of God. We hear that as a statement of divine truth. You are, we are, everyone is created in the image and likeness of God. So then what happens when we see these images that don't look like God that we know? What do we do with that? How do we be with that? And what is our calling? If we're truly created in the image and likeness of God, and then we don't see that demonstrated, what is our calling? What is that image? What is that likeness? What is it? What is it if we were created in it? And how do we get more of it here? How do we get more of it in ourselves? The human condition is a funny thing. If you think about and really think about how people relate that message to their lives most commonly on our planet, in religion, in the world, you are created in the image and likeness of God. Isn't it more that people are trying to create God in the image and likeness of themselves? There's something in the human condition that is flip-flopped, trying to create a God in the image and likeness of ourselves. So rather than raising the consciousness and saying, what is this thing we call God? We start declaring what our God looks like and how our God feels. That's part of the human condition. Annie Lamott, the great writer of today, said, we know that we've made God in our image and likeness when God hates the same people we do. We know that we've made God in our own image and likeness when God hates the same people we do. It's a big statement, isn't it? I was on my phone this week. I had, not this week, but recently, and I did the latest update on my little iPhone. And I am an emoji user. If you don't know what an emoji is, they're those little icons, those little images on your phone that have faces and pictures and thumbs up and flowers and all sorts of little things. And in a second, you just put this little picture on your phone instead of writing a bunch of words and you shoot it back. And so I did my update, and I went to go send something to someone, a thumbs up or something like that. And all of a sudden, I pressed on the thumb, I pressed on the face, I pressed on the image, and what came up was not just the image that I was pressing on, but it was a whole scroll of images. And in those were a white thumb, a little bit darker thumb, a little bit beiger thumb, a little bit browner thumb, a black thumb. And then on the faces, all the different colors of the thumbs, the faces, all the different images, all the different shades of being. And I had this moment where I just went, like the yay for diversity, right? But this crushing, I hadn't thought of that. I've been using those, and I hadn't thought of that. I hadn't thought of all the people that are using the white thumb to represent their thumb when their thumb isn't white, or the white face to represent their face when their face isn't white. And all of a sudden there was this sadness, right? This, it is so embedded in our culture. And then I felt grateful that there's an expansion. And then I read all these little blogs about the questions behind it, and now there's all these other conversations. Is it a good thing or was it a bad thing? Is it making things better or now is it making things worse? Now you can insert race into every conversation, into every text. And there were conversations among African Americans saying, now if I send the lady with the painting her nails picture and it's a white hand, am I saying something if I'm black? People have begun to use the icons, now the images, for racial slander. And so the question has been posed, what's going on? You know, you try to diversify and you try to expand your consciousness, and then it's used against. And so you know what they ended up doing? They ended up making, right, the master slate of all of them, and they're all bright yellow, like those sunshine smiley faces. So we all look like the Simpsons now. And if you want to stay neutral, you put the Simpson face on and the Simpson icon on. But this is just telling of that notion, right, that we need to feel like we are part of the whole. That is very important, is it not? We need to feel included. We need to be able to identify ourselves. Identify ourselves. And the images we use need to include all of us. How can they? But they need to include all of us, and we need to raise to a vibrational consciousness where we know that we are included in all of it. Has anyone thought, right, about the Jesus before he was white? Really thought about the Jesus before he was white? Because there was a time. And in fact, if we, traced back to find out what Jesus would really look like, he would probably physically have the characteristics closer towards other cultures, like the darker skinned, possibly like some of the folks that are in the news creating terrorism. He may have looked like something like that. He may have looked a bit Middle Eastern, right? How would that change our experience of our Jesus? Are we so caught up in making Jesus like us? There's a good part of making Jesus like us. There's a good part of making Jesus black, making Jesus Asian, making Jesus white, making Jesus all of these things. There's a good part of it. And the good part of it is that we all need to feel like we are part of the master teacher, that we are from it. We all need to feel like we are part of the image and likeness of God. And that's the positive part. But when we start tearing it apart and saying it's like me, it's not like you, it's like him, it's not like her, it's a man, it's not a woman, all we're doing is separating ourselves. All we're doing is shredding the divine within and the divine outside of us, shredding it to bits and pieces according to a human condition, trying to make that image of the Christhood and the image of God and the image of humanity something unlike what it is, which is complete wholeness and complete love. So are we ready to step into a future where we let go of belittling God? belittling the God consciousness, the idea of what it is and whose it is, and start pressing forth the idea that it is everyone's. We're on the verge of that leap. We're on the verge of the expression where we start to expand, and then we confuse ourselves, and then we contract back, and then we look at it all, and then it all becomes confusing, and it all becomes unconscious, then it all becomes conscious. It's time we stop creating God in our image. And it's time we start pressing forth the image of God onto this planet, the image of God that is universal, that is oneness. You know, I was at Reverend Robin's church years ago when I first started ministry. I was on the road for 2 years, and I was in a van driving across the country, and I went through Florida, and Reverend Robin opened her house and her ministry and her heart to me. I think I stayed in her house for a while. And I think I stayed in Florida for about a month. But I remember that Sunday, one of the things that I ended, something that I said with, was this passage in Genesis. And I jokingly just said, I'm going to leave that for your minister to talk to you about. But in Genesis, it says, "Then God said, let us make mankind in our image and our likeness." Everyone always focuses on the word image and likeness. And I said, what about that part that it says, let us make man in our image and in our likeness? And then I floated off to my van and drove somewhere else. What might that be about? We know the scripture writers were people. Imagine if you were intuiting that scripture. If it was yours to call forth that story into humanity, into people's bedside tables, into people's Bibles. And imagine if you were trying to get the essence of what you were hearing, seeing, feeling, knowing was to come forth. And your concept is people, men and women. The concept and the framework you're writing from is that. But you get this divine idea that we're made in the image and likeness of something absolute and something magnificent, in the image and the likeness. But then you get this little thing of like, but what is that? What is it? And you just get a us, our, not a separate self, not a man, not a person, not even a being. You get an us and an our. It's demonstrated from the first moment of Scripture that there is an us and an our that is the real one that we're talking about, that we're referencing all the time, and we are made in the image and likeness of it. It is of the fabric that we are. And since then, we've tried to pick it apart and identify it as a me. Let me make man in my image and my likeness. Well, that can exclude a lot of people. If you're a woman, you've been a translator of the word man for a long time, right? And if you are not the dominant voice in your culture, you've been a translator of other conversations for a long time. The master teacher was a translator of that conversation. You want to hear what he said? When questioning the role of Mary, when questioning whether Mary could be one of the teachers and one of the disciples, because she was a woman, right? She didn't fit the image of the me or of the Father or of the limited idea of God that the people of the time had. She didn't fit that image. So here's what the master teacher said. Simon Peter asked and said to them, Mary should leave us, for females are not worthy of life. This is in the Gospel of Thomas, saying 1:14. Mary should leave us, for females are not worthy of life. Jesus said, see, I am going to lead her, to make her male, so that she too might become a living spirit that resembles you males. Every female element that makes itself male will enter the kingdom of heaven. It's the first little transgender activity in the Bible. You think it's just happening now. No, it was way back then. And I'm thinking of the master teacher looking at these people going, I've taught you all of this. We've elevated our consciousness. We're ready to just burst out and share it with the world. And here they go, oh, but wait, she's not one of us. She's a woman. Can't do it. Oh, but wait, not like me. Can't do it. And what does he say? Do you think that he really made her male? I mean, really, do we think that he made her male? Just give me a second. Going into surgery, I'll come back. Hold on. No, I think more like he was just like, really? 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 Okay, poof, I made her male. Are we good now? Good. I believe what that really meant is that if you have opened up to a new place in consciousness, that is the male that he is talking about is not male, man, male. That male that he is talking about is a consciousness of the Christ. It's putting on the Christ. It's elevating the consciousness to the Christ. And he is saying anyone that elevates their consciousness is this. Anyone that elevates their consciousness is qualified. Anyone that elevates their consciousness is expressing in the image and the likeness of me. And whatever that looks like is the image and likeness of me, of us. There are other religions that have it easier. There are other religions that have it easier, which is why the Christ, the master teacher, kept pointing away from his physical body and his physical being and saying, I am one with the Father. I am one with the source. In Hinduism and Buddhism and even in Judaism, not using the name having reverence around it, not using the name. And then if you look at Shiva, Krishna, Vishnu, if you look at the symbol of the lotus and the Bodhi tree, if you look at all those other symbols, those are symbols to represent the divine in humanity. But you know what? You can't really sit there with Ganesh and go, it's more like me than you. It's more like me than you. I think they were talking about me, not you. One of the reasons for those characters is because they cross that human condition of trying to separate, segregate, put into boxes, make identifications with. One has to overcome their humanity to look through to say, I am like that. I am one with those principles. I am one with that power. I am one with that activity. That demonstration is for me. That symbol represents something that is in my life. So make it, an elephant, make it whatever it is. Sometimes that jumps over some of the issues when we make it a man. And I don't believe that was ever the original intention. But it's ours to stand in the practice of new thought, in the practice of original Christianity, in pressing forth what the master teacher taught, stood for. In beginning to show and to talk about what the image and likeness of God is, and take it down from the true crucifix of making God in our image, of trying to make God consciousness so small that we fit it into a box that is not attainable to any of us. Because when it's not attainable to any of us, we don't see the images of the God consciousness anymore, and we don't find ourselves in that picture. if we can't find ourselves in that picture of what God is, of what the master teacher awakened to, of what teachers in religions and ancient traditions throughout the ages have awakened to reach enlightened consciousness, to reach a state of God consciousness. If we cannot look at that image and say, there I am, that's me too, then we have a disease on this planet. Then we have a sickness. Because people that grow up without that image, people that are swimming in violence, in anger, in hatred, in blame, and in separation, create from that. They create from that separation, from those images, from that violence. Anyone, right? Any one of us that has experienced violence, addiction, problems, darkness, some ugliness in our lives, can probably find a place within where we became a little bit capable of that, where we learned it and it became what we knew. And if we do our work, we're present to it and we work to overcome it. But imagine being saturated in it. Or imagine it being so invisible you don't even know it's there. If we don't have a higher image of all of humanity, how can it aspire to it? How will we demonstrate it? So we're here to bring it. We're here to fulfill that image, that beingness, rather than painting God like us. It's time we paint ourselves as God and remember that that is our divine birthright, that that is our true destiny, and that is our calling. Charles Fillmore said, "It is your mission to express all that you can imagine God to be. Let this be your standard of achievement. Never lower it. Never allow yourself to be belittled by the cry of sacrilege." In Talks on Truth, it says, "It is no idle experiment, this keeping in the mind the words of Jesus. It's a very momentous undertaking and may mark the most important period in the life of an individual. There must be a sincerity and an earnestness and a right motive, and with all the determination to understand the spiritual import. The merging of God and man," Charles Fillmore says, "God and humankind, does not mean the total obliteration of humankind's consciousness, but its glorification or expansion into that of the divine." We teach that the Christ consciousness is the essence of every being. It's not about Christianity. It's not about Jesus of your childhood. It's about the cosmic Christ. It's about enlightenment. It's about awakening. It's about all religions and no religions. And it's spoken of in any way. And are we willing to let people have the freedom to express it and feel it and intuit it in whatever way suits them, so that we can bring more of this consciousness onto earth? To let it look like whatever it's going to look like. Let ourselves call it whatever we're going to call it. And know it by its works. Know it by its image. Know it when we see the true image and likeness of the divine. I feel like I saw that when I heard the little voice clips of some of the families speaking right to the perpetrator this week, in their tears and in their suffering, not pushing away any of the true feelings that they had, but crying out, lifting up, saying, even this I will forgive you. I forgive you. Standing in that. Not saying that doesn't mean there's not work to be done. Not saying that anything is right. Not saying I am lessening or loosening my power, but saying I am calling forth a power that is stronger than anything this world can offer me. There was a piece I came by, a powerful piece from Sue Sicking on prayer. And she said, true prayer is not an asking for things, not even the best things. Prayer is the lifting of the consciousness to the place where the things are. The lifting of the consciousness to the place where the things are. So if you want love, lifting the consciousness to the state of love and moving from there. If you want forgiveness, lifting the consciousness to the state of forgiveness and moving from there. Lifting our awareness, lifting our consciousness to the highest state available and accessible to us and acting from there. And then pressing forth that image and likeness into our world. It's a normal thing in our day and age to see violence, to see separation, to see poor behavior, poor language, to see the bottom of humanity, the lowest aspects of humanity. And it's a privilege to see the Christ. It's a privilege to see the power of the divine expressing through people, as people, in the midst of everything. If we let go of that calling, we let go of our birthright. If we let go of that charge, we let go of our purpose. And if we let go of that common vision, we let go of our hope. So we're here to create a field of impression, to create new images, because the image that we use makes an imprint, and the imprint that we make makes a blueprint, and the blueprint that we arrive at is what generates the next cycle. Unless we have a spiritual practice that interrupts that cycle, where we recalibrate, we check in, we feel it. We can feel ourselves when we are pressing forth the image and the likeness of the divine. God is love. God is perfect law. God is absolute good. God is life itself. God is power. God is mind. God is substance. And we are expressions of that substance. It is ours to remember that our words are creative, our words are powerful. Just like dough, our mind has consciousness. Just like dough, if you took it and this consciousness, you pressed it in a cookie cutter image, that is what our thoughts and our minds do to that dough. And you put it in the oven and you cook it and you bake it and people smell it and people eat it. So whatever we're cooking is here for all of us to absorb and digest and ingest. If we focus on the darkness, we become the darkness. A wise person told me, try not to spend too much time in the darkness. Your brain will grow an attachment to it. Give yourself breaks by focusing on gratitude. It is ours to change the image in this world, on this planet. It is ours to shift the programming. It is ours to elevate the conversation. It's ours to recalibrate. And it's ours to remember that we are the image and the likeness, and to everywhere we go, with everyone we see, remind them of that truth. Namaste.